The remake of Stephen King's It has just hit theaters and once again spikes the fascination as well as fear some have of killer clowns. Ever since the 1986 novel had been published, there has been a gradual influx of popularity around killer clowns. There have been numerous horror movies that have been produced, such as the original It film, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and Clown House, that have helped shape the image of killer clowns in modern pop culture. Sightings of killer clowns throughout the nation as well have seen an increase in the past few years. Many have theorized that Stephen King was inspired to create It by a true killer clown, John Gacy, but contrary to this theory, King has already openly admitted what inspired him to make the story. However, the character of John Gacy is in some ways similar to that of Pennywise in It, and in a sense, makes John Gacy the real-life Pennywise killer clown. For those of you who may not know, John Gacy was a notorious serial killer who killed between the years of 1972 to 1978 in Illinois. He was charged with 33 counts of murder, and his victims consisted of teenage boys and young men. He had started his own business known as PDM, which stood for painting, decorating, and maintenance. Aside from managing his business, Gacy frequently participated in children's parties, dressed up as a clown he created called Pogo the Clown. According to Gacy, he dressed up as a clown because it allowed him to regress into his childhood. However, it is believed that there may have been an ulterior and sinister reason as to why he dressed up as Pogo the Clown and frequented little children's parties because of his constant struggle with his sexuality and attraction to young men. Gacy carried out his first murder in 1972 when he picked up a 16-year-old named Timothy McCoy who was traveling from Michigan to Omaha. He lured the boy to his house with the promise that he could spend the night and then he would return him back in time to catch the Greyhound bus the next day. Gacy repeatedly stabbed the young man to death and then buried him in his crawlspace of his house in Norwood Park. In an interview after Gacy's arrest, he admitted that killing for the first time gave him a feeling of excitement and that death was the ultimate thrill. In 1974, Gacy carried out his second murder, and in the year 1975, his PDM company began to grow very quickly. His workforce consisted mostly of high school students and young men, and unfortunately, many of them became his victims and would never return home. His mode of operation was to trick the young men into putting on a set of handcuffs by persuading them with alcohol, drugs, or just gaining his trust in general, and he occasionally did this as part of a clowning routine. He would then go on to rape and torture his victims and then strangle them with a rope. The majority of Gacy's killings would occur between the years of 1976 through 1978, and he referred to these years as his cruising years. The majority of his victims would be buried underneath his crawlspace, except for 5 of them, which were thrown into the Des Plaines River. Eventually, Gacy garnered attention from the police when a young man by the name of Robert Peist, who worked at a pharmacy, disappeared and was last seen talking to Gacy about a job offer. He was investigated and assigned continuous police surveillance, which over time caused him to become stressed, and he eventually confessed to his killings. Prior to his confession, he had stated to one of the surveillance officers that clowns could get away with murder. The authorities were able to obtain a warrant and found the bodies of his victims in his crawlspace. He was subsequently arrested and placed on death row, and was eventually executed by lethal injection in 1994. In contrast to Stephen King's It, who was a menacing entity from another dimension, John Gacy was a human monster from the very planet we live in. He is the real-life Pennywise killer clown, as he often dressed up as an innocent clown, but deep inside held a very dark and sinister side to him that took the lives of his young victims as well as their families.